That's when the love affair started. I can remember feeling different because I put something in my body. And then when I was in high school, probably, I always say this, eighth grade, I'm going to the dance. I'm terrified. I'm skinny. I got big ears. Girls don't talk to me. And in ninth grade, I started to drink and everything changed. I couldn't wait to get to the dance.
This is the Knocking Doors Down podcast. I'm your host, Jason LaChance, and here we unlock stories of resilience, triumph, and transformation. Hey, please hit that subscribe button, and while you're at it, why not leave a rating, a review, or a thumb up on YouTube and a comment in the video. And on this episode, my guest and I discuss 3 things he's grateful for. What was his family's lineage of addiction, and how did family support help him break free from his addiction? Also, how did working a 12-step program truly humble my guest? My guest and I also discuss how we both had learning disabilities and some mental health challenges that later impacted our pathway to addiction. Also, my guest and I reflect on early moments in recovery and their importance. Plus, how did my guest working his recovery program prepare him to become an ESPN broadcaster? We also have random questions and final thoughts. And here's my guest on this episode of Knocking Doors Down. Pete Sousa, thanks for joining me on Knocking Doors Down.
Dude, it's an honor to be here with you. I've listened a bunch. I've gotten to know you through social media, which can be a very powerful, positive tool at times.
Yes.
When I'm not like doom scrolling. So I really do appreciate it. I appreciate what you're putting out there.
Oh, likewise. I want to get into all the stuff that you're doing and just being a person of service in this beautiful thing that we get that second shot of life in recovery. But I start my day with gratitude. I usually write down at least 5 things, but I'm going to just ask you for 3 things you're grateful for today.
Well, the first thing, it's funny. I go through a lot of times if I'm really jammed up, I'll go through an alphabet, right, of gratitude. And a lot of times with so that's first thing that comes to my mind I'm a 12-step guy and I go to meetings and, Alcoholics Anonymous is something that I'm beyond grateful for. And I'm sure we'll get into that. And different people have different ways of getting sober, right? But that was mine. And that was essential to my life because I don't know if I was not smart enough to pick up life lessons or if I was just loaded the whole time, but I missed a lot. And so these principles and this like blueprint to life that is out there for me, that is one thing I'm extremely grateful for, the stuff that comes with the program. I think that I got to say I'm grateful for my mom because, she's still in my life. And without my mom, I guess without my parents, I never would have gotten sober. I had a career and then my career dissolved because of alcohol and drug abuse. And then my life imploded. And it was, right in front of their eyes. That was the only place I could go. When I said I was ready to go to rehab, they said, it's about time. and off I went. So I'm so grateful for my parents. And I think my brother Kevin passed away last year. He was sober more than 10 years, about 12 years, 13 years. And that's somebody who I feel like he's with me every day. He died sober. And we got to foster an incredible relationship. I guess I'll say my brothers. Right. Michael and Kevin, they're both sober. Like Kevin's legacy living through me is pretty cool. So I every day I think of him try to live life like a loose shirt because that's what he would want me to do.
Right on.
Yeah.
Well, you talking about your family really resonates with me in that it is a family disease. It runs on both sides of my family, but I needed that support of my family. My father's been in long-term recovery. I understand him now more than ever, as we weren't that close when I was a kid because he was in active addiction and I was a late bloomer. But, I think society is doing a better job of looking at that it is a family disease and the family then has to be on board with that recovery journey for the suffering addict.
In my family, it was a no-brainer. There were two components to exactly what you're talking about. One, it was a family disease. In my experience, like bloodlines, right? Like my dad's whole family was you're either alcoholic, who's like barely functioning and hanging on. My dad was actually, what's functional, but he was functional. He had a job all the time. He did whatever he could to support us emotionally. It was what it was. But then the rest of his family, that they all died from drinking, or they ended up in institutions, jails, right?
Yeah.
And my mom's just got a little bit on her side, but the fact of the matter was, when I was ready to admit I was an alcoholic, I didn't have far to go to
Mm.
really see, okay, this is like it's around me, this alcoholism and this disease. So that actually, once I really stopped fighting, it made it a little easier, knowing that it was something that wasn't my fault. I mean, it was literally like I had a reaction when I drank alcohol that was amazing at first,
Yeah.
and everybody on my dad's side of the family had the same deal, and they couldn't put it down. And then the family disease, right? Like, yeah, that is what you mentioned is so important. I was lucky that my mom knew about alcoholism because she had researched it because of my father, and yeah, my whole family. Like I said, both my brothers, right, sober, and it's the last group we wanted to join. I thought, but it certainly worked out.
Yeah, that's funny because and I kind of stole this from my mentor, who you'll be meeting, Flynn Anderson, at Parents and Addicts in Need. Was like, he would always say, "I didn't want this shit on my resume."
No, not at all. I mean, I had to be 100% broken to look at this thing and think, okay, like I'll give this a try. And it was like any sane thinking person looks at that and says, why wouldn't you give this a try, years ago? Or why wouldn't you have given it your all when you tried? Look, I was very sick. And legit, I mean, but for the grace of God go I. I mean, there's nothing between me and the guy who overdosed, who didn't get the opportunity that I've been granted.
Yeah.
So it's like, you talk about gratitude, right? When I'm talking to another addict and somebody in recovery like you, I can get there pretty fast.
Yeah. Well, and you share words of humbleness that, I mean, it's vital in a successful life, period. And we were kind of joking before we hit record, the blessing of being a 12-step individuals. We get some of these beautiful principles that we've seen and tested in practice for, God, how old is the AA book now? It's almost 100 years?
30s, right? Like, or 1935, something like that. So it's getting
Yeah.
there. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, we've seen so many people utilize these principles and thrive in life. And it's really sometimes maybe that to individuals that haven't struggled with addiction, don't know someone, or,
Yeah,
well,
totally.
we all do. It might come across as a sense of arrogance, but really it's a humbleness.
Yes. Yes, 100%. And I was lucky to see people go before me,
Mm.
that had gotten sober and were part of 12 steps. And they had something that I wanted, dude. So not
Yeah.
only did I need to, get sober in order to live, uh, and again, like what's your mentor's name? The guy who's going to be the addicts that I'm going to meet, Flynn.
Flint.
So
Yeah.
Flynn, yeah, what he said, it's exactly right. Like it's the last thing I wanted on my resume, right? But it was just an amazing gift,
Yeah.
and the ability to find myself in that position where I can kind of glow and let the sunlight of the spirit come through me through sobriety. And that's what other people had that were in sobriety, right? The people I was talking about that had what I wanted. And I never thought I was ever going to be able to even flirt with that. I just wanted not to die and
Yeah.
wanted, I was out of moves.
Have you dug into the archives of past Knocking Doors Down podcast episodes? The Knocking Doors Down podcast archive is available to you for free. Check it out. Here's a snippet from when Charlie Sheen was on the podcast.
There's another thing to consider that's just practical and real and true and rampant: fentanyl.
Yeah.
Fentanyl. You keep fucking around with street drugs these days. I mean, it's there's a 90% chance that it's going to have fentanyl. And there's a 90% chance you're not going to survive it.
This episode and so many more in the Knocking Doors Down archive. And while you're at it, hit that subscribe button, give this video a thumb up, leave a comment, and share with somebody else that you know will get value out of the Knocking Doors Down podcast. Well, take me back, if you would. At what point really did kind of substance use enter life and up through that moment of surrender?
I mean, I like the fact that, like, you know, you're asking questions and I'm not just telling my story, because that's a really good question. And I haven't talked about this in a while. It probably means I need to get into more service. So my first experience with a mind altering drug, and again, I'm not a doctor. Like, if people have meds they need to be on, that's their business. This is my experience, right? Sure. So when I was like in 5th grade or whatever, I was one of those kids who was diagnosed as attention deficit, right? ADD. And it was kind of like, you know, this was like the mid to late 80s. And so it was just the beginning of the treatment for ADD, as far as I knew. I didn't know anybody else that was on Ritalin.
Yeah.
In fact, I remember taking it and, like, well, I'll get to that. But so the first time I can really remember, like, feeling like turned on was taking Ritalin before school, and at lunch I would take it. And there was something about it where I think 2 things happened. One, I don't have like one particular moment. Well, I actually do, just sitting there in school, like saying the Pledge of Allegiance or whatever, and thinking to myself, like, I feel pretty good. Like, I'm turned on right now. Like, I can do whatever I need to do. And then, so I think 2 things happened. One, there was some sort of chemical response where I bought the bullshit and I thought, oh, this is making me so much better. And 2, for me early on in my life, I think it was, okay, I got to take something to be something. You know, like the placebo effect was very real for me. I'm not good enough. Yep. So if I take this, I will be good enough. And the combination of how in love I was with the feeling I got from, for me particularly, alcohol and speed, the combination, I mean, the marriage was something I just adored. And I thought, you know, the first time I did cocaine, and this is years later, right? I'm talking about being in 5th grade, but I went hard. I didn't go that hard. But the first time I did it, I was like, I'm going to do this every day for the rest of my life. That's just how it hit my brain. So, but back to that first initial experience, and like, that's when the love affair started. I can remember feeling different because I put something in my body. And then when I was in high school, probably, I always say this, 8th grade, I'm going to the dance. I'm terrified. I'm skinny. I got big ears. Girls don't talk to me. And in 9th grade, I started to drink and everything changed. I couldn't wait to get to the dance. Yeah. All that stuff, those insecurities completely left me. And the biggest lie I ever told myself, I started to tell myself right then and there, like, this stuff makes me better, you know? And so in high school, I really hit it hard at drinking. I discovered my mom's medicine cabinet. She wasn't an addict like us, so there was all kinds of prescription pills that she just never finished that I made sure I did.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, I'll finish those. And you know, she wasn't even looking at him, so nobody knew. And I was a good athlete, good enough to where people kind of stayed off my ass. I got a scholarship to play football in college. And, you know, that's when stuff really kind of got dark for me, because when I was going into my, I was going to the University of Richmond. That's where I went. And I was getting a test. Like, I was going to play in the city all-star game. It's called the Hero Bowl. And, you know, it was the spring of my senior year in high school, and I was getting a physical. And the doctor was like, hey, something's wrong with your heart. I can't clear you to play in this game. See a cardiologist first. And I saw a cardiologist, and the cardiologist said, hey, you've got something called cardiomyopathy. Your heart is very weak and it's enlarged, and like, you cannot play football. Like, maybe if your heart heals, you'll play. And then he said you could have gotten it one of 2 ways. It could be viral. And with the virus, you know, you're fighting this virus for so long. virus goes away, your body attacks your organs. But it was also alcohol abuse and drug abuse was also on the table. When he told me that, I remember thinking like, wow. But Jason,
Yeah.
it was like 2 seconds where I was like, no, it was definitely the virus. Like I don't,
Yeah.
there was nothing that was going to come between me and that liquid, dude. I could not imagine life without it. So now here you're talking about my dreams. You know, everybody thinks they're going to play in the NFL or whatever. But I was attached to that identity too, and
Yeah.
just an athlete being a football player. And so that's off the table now because of the alcohol and the addiction. But also, like my life is in jeopardy. And the first thing I was like, no, it can't be the alcohol. So that was my first huge consequence. And also the first time I looked at myself and I was like, wow, I was really lost, you know, in this
Yeah.
thing early on in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I can so relate to that looking for something external. It's like one of my taglines is no outside solutions to inside problems. You know, I grew up in a home. The addiction wasn't just chemical, but it was sexual, primarily, you know, pornography prevalent. And after I went through what I did at around 5 years old, that then became my first drug. And people like, well, how? Like, you're a kid. I'm like, come on, kids, we're born sexual beings. And one of my
Yeah.
best friends, his little son, is like, Dad, when can we go see boobs? You know, it's like it changed my
Yeah.
emotional state. And I, you know, now kind of in middle life and long-term recovery, the longest I've had, and starting to see some things like, God, am I ADHD? And people like, oh yeah, you have that kind of stimulation so early in life. These things do play out this way.
Yeah.
And it's just it's that denial, and it's amazing that that denial sits there. You know, I mean, I
And I
was
was
an
just
addict long before I was admitting that I was an addict.
do you find when somebody now in your life, do you find yourself coachable? Like when somebody says, hey, you may have this, right? You take a look at it.
Mm,
You know, back when I was drinking or using, I didn't take a look at anything.
sure.
If you told me I had something, I was like, yeah, okay. Well, I'll deal with that. I don't even know when, but not now.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, you figure you're at that age, leaving for college, you're 17, 18 years old, you're about to start your hero's journey. And it's like the story that's built up behind it is, hey, I'm a sensational athlete here. I'm going to have a scholarship. What the hell do you mean? It's got to be this other thing because there's nothing about me.
No,
I'm invisible, man.
and it's true because and I thought I had that alcoholic sense of entitlement
Mm,
where it was, you know, born on third base, thought I hit a triple. I heard somebody say that once, and that was they were talking right to me, and you know that was, you know, I was by all accounts I was a nice kid, uh, positive, and you know I think that I was just lucky to have that inside me. I'm naturally a positive person, um, but I still didn't do shit. I didn't work hard. I didn't like, you know what I mean? Like I thought I
hmm
was going to get by in life on a wink and a handshake my whole life. And I thought that would be okay. And then, you know, this, not only is that not true for anybody, you know, you take shortcuts and you get what you get, right? But also when the darkness came in with like, with substances, it was like, wow, I just didn't know if I was on foot or horseback. You know, all I know is I wanted more substances in my body.
Yeah. Yeah. Do you recollect that moment of surrender, like the real just when it was serious? Because all of us, you know, puking into the porcelain god. Oh, that's the last time I drink, or you get the nosebleed, and you're like, oh yeah, never doing that again. But
I was pretty committed, right?
mm,
Like to the point where I thought, okay, look, this stuff is so advantageous for me in my life. Again, you know, I was a kid who was nervous, who, you know, I love sports. And I loved, you know, I thought females were very attractive. I loved hanging out with my friends. I didn't have the courage to talk to females, and sports was just kind of like that was my how I would connect with other guys,
yeah,
right? Yeah, you raise
hand
your
up.
hand. Yeah, and so alcohol enabled me to talk to girls. It made me feel confident, and then cocaine made me feel even better. and the combination of the two was unbelievable. And I couldn't imagine why I would ever turn my back on this. And that's the sickness of people that aren't, addicts and alcoholics. I can understand why it would be tough to wrap your mind around that. I mean, here's somebody whose entire life is exploding. I had all these good things. I mean, I left college. I got a job in New York. Again, that felt ass backwards into it. I got a job in New York. I was working in football because I stayed at Richmond and worked with the team. I was smoking pot every day. I was barely even there. I mean, like they would have me film practice and do stuff like break down plays, and I was stoned the whole time and drunk at night, whatever. So I just kind of muddled through school, and I had all these good opportunities after school. And I mean, it was a gift wrapped, and I did everything in my power, or alcohol and drugs did, however you want to say it, just to give it right back. And when I was living in New York after college, I got into cocaine, and that was like, what a trip that was until the trip came to an end. And I was at 27 years old. I'd lost everything that you can lose at 27, and I tried to get sober then, and I couldn't do it. 90 days in, I just felt like, I mean, my life was broken. I had to go home, move with my parents. I was a guy that after school had this life that was like, oh, wow, he's doing great. And all this stuff doesn't matter. People thought it was going okay. And, I'm back living with my parents, and I'm at the neighborhood bar drunk all the time. And, finally I wrecked my mom's car, get a DUI. And I'm like, okay, I'll go to a meeting. And I go to a meeting, and it feels good and it works. And I'm talking to other people in recovery, and I'm getting that juice. And, they say, don't quit before the miracle happens. I quit before the miracle happened. And, it's just part of my story. However you want to slice it, wasn't ready, didn't do the work, whatever. It didn't happen for me. And I was 90 days sober. And, I was hanging out with buddies, and I just needed to be a part of, and I started smoking weed. So then I went through 9 months where I was going to meetings and saying I was sober, but I'm smoking like all the time. And my life did kind of get better. I got a job again. This is when I started to work in pro sports. I worked at USA Basketball, and then I worked for the 76ers, my hometown team, the Charlotte Hornets, doing public relations. And then, of course, that, like I'm on borrowed time, dude. I mean, like the whole time, because I start to drink, and right after I start to drink, I start to do drugs again. And, you're bullshitting everybody that'll listen to you, like I got it under control or whatever. And anybody that gets close enough to the fire, they either get totally burned, because like at the end of the day, Jason, like it doesn't matter. Like I will steal your shit and help you look for it if I'm like if I'm drinking, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I go. I mean, I might do great for the first like 2 months, or 2 weeks or 2 days. I'm at your vacation house, but like, trust me, dude, the alcoholic is an addict is showing up. And so it had obviously, to answer your question in the longest way possible, it became extremely problematic in 2002. Then I thought I had it under control. And then I was once again, after all these great opportunities, these alluring jobs, I was back at home living with my parents in 2011, and now I'm in my 30s. I was in an awful way, and it was as dark as it could possibly get. And a guy who, I don't even know if this dude's still sober now, and that's kind of how this whole thing is really amazing. I was still drinking, I was still using, and this guy was my temporary sponsor because I was going to meetings, right? Because the walls were closing in. I'm in my 30s, I can't stay sober. And I don't know what to do. I can't stop. And I go to a meeting. I asked this guy to be my temporary sponsor. He's like, okay, I'll pick you up. We'll go to a meeting. And he picks me up, and we actually go to dinner. And I'm like, oh, shit, I got to sit across from this guy. I'm like on drugs. I'm like drinking probably the better part of the day. I'm just doing that sober thing to keep people off my ass. And the guy says to me, dude, he's like, he tells me his story. And he's like, he was a year sober, maybe a little over a year. He's like, dude, you should go to rehab. And because that's what he did.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking like, holy shit, I've never tried that. And it was like the smallest window that God could open up for me. That's how I describe it. I almost see a window opening up at the restaurant, and I just like fell through on the other side, dude. And I remember being like, I'm sure part of it was ego. Like, wow, that actually sounds pretty good. Like I can tell people I'm going to rehab. I've never done that. No idea of I'd be talking to you today, some 12 years later, right? But my whole life changed that night. And I went home, and that's the moment I was talking about. I told my parents, like, I think I should go to rehab. They were like, no kidding. And everything really started to change. I was totally broken, and I got that. And I got that the only way out was following suggestions. And, I started to feel good too, right? In recovery.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and that's part of the miracle that I know that for so many, when they're newcomers, it just seems like a daunting thing when you're just trying to get another hour, another minute of sobriety. But if the option's there, like people ask me, did you do rehab? I just said, unfortunately, it wasn't an option, and I'm really blessed that God, higher power, whatever it is, life presented in front of me these beautiful people that helped me along the way. And then when I had a slip up during COVID, I say relapse. Some people say slip up because it lasted a night. Through doing this, there's
How long
people
did you relapse for?
a night.
A night?
Yeah, about 4 hours.
Yeah.
So some people call it
What a crazy disease, right? I mean, it's just like, yeah, man. You're an addict. You're qualified.
Yeah, right.
Where you are now may not be where you came from. The choices you make today may spiral out of control or spin you in the right direction. Discover a riveting, true story of how Carlos Vieira nearly destroyed his life and lived to tell about it. Stand up, stand firm, believe, make it happen, and live through the madness. Knocking doors down along the way. And don't miss others telling their powerful stories on our podcast. Visit kddmediacompany.com.
I drove to the convenience store by my house, and I don't remember going there, and I was sober. I was stone cold sober. I do not remember it. And then, I don't want to get in. We could talk about it maybe at another time, but I think I've told the story here. Essentially, trying to keep a friendship with someone that I shouldn't have. It was an ex, and just really hit all those little things that fired every negative fight or flight emotion, all of it. And so, I don't even remember till I was about three beers in, and then calling my now sponsor.
What a beautiful moment that you make that call, because dude, like people go out and they don't come back, like relapsing is okay if you're back in the room, but like some people relapse and they just never come back. And I don't ever want to say like slipping up or relapsing is okay, but I think you and everybody else gets my point. The one thing you said that I can so relate to, this dude, part of my journey was after I went to rehab, I lived in a recovery house. And this guy, God rest his soul, Jerry Z, he was like a counselor. And I remember he was like, matters of the heart will take you out. Like, he's like that. And I remember being like, and that felt so good because one, it stuck in my brain, right? And two, I was like, holy shit, people are really telling the truth around here. Like, because I've been carrying this around with me all my life, and I've been too proud to say like, oh, like, I've gotten my heart broken, or, oh, like, I was like, if a girl hurt me, I was like, well, just forget females. Like, they're all, whatever, I listened to gangster rap, and that, I was just a moron, and so, but that was my coping skill.
Yeah.
Gangster rap. You know what I mean? Like listening to that and being like, yeah, that's how women are. I was so lost, and so, and honestly, like, we're going off on this, but it's a big thing about my recovery and part of my addiction. Like, I would treat women like drugs.
Oh, yes.
How are they going to make you feel? Yeah. Right. I mean, yeah. So and I think that's important. The reason I wanted to talk about that is because I share that whenever I can, because, when I first got sober, I was like, I'm never going to be able to date. I'm never going to be able to hook up or have sex. I'm never going to, all these lies we tell ourselves, it just aren't true. And look, I'll be honest, for me, it took a while, dude. I don't think I was terrified to like date anybody. And, I got a wonderful girlfriend now. We've been together for a while, and it's like all the stuff that kept me drunk, it's all stuff I'm doing today. You
Right.
know, like all the stuff. How am I going to do that? How it's like my life now is what's happening is I used to lie to people on a bar stool about the doing what I'm doing today.
Yeah.
It's like that's it's a lot of talk right there. But yeah, I get how I just get how that stuff like that can get inside your head, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I mean, you figure, I mean, it was the perfect cocktail I guess that's not a pun, but it
No, I get it, dude.
it was so you take someone that, okay, I had some things that happened in my childhood that I never did anything to mature from, process, let alone when we're using. Well, there goes your maturity rate, and so spending about 10 years in alcoholism and never dealing with these things. Well, of course, when I'm 6 months sober, 7 months sober, or something like this, that I had yet to confront any of this stuff. Plus, it was the most horrible, toxic thing. Like, in retrospect, it's not just, oh, that person was toxic. Like, whoa, I was an alcoholic when this person met me, and it was pretty evident quickly. What the hell were they thinking spending 2 years in my
Totally.
life?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
what's up with them? And what was that mutual whatever it was? I mean, trauma bonding, really. It wasn't anything
I
positive,
tell the story about, and this is where, like, for me, literally being, whether you want to call it institutionalized or whatever, there was a girl I was dating when I got sober. And like, look, I was bad news. She was bad news. So she comes to see me at rehab, like, 2 weeks in. And at this point, I'm starting to feel good. Right. And she comes in and it's clear she's like on something. And she's showing me a picture of her daughter on her phone. And like a text message comes up, and it's from another dude. And I'm like, who's the phone? Let me see the phone. And then I'm like, God damn, like here I am again. And I remember being like, it was a very spiritual thing looking back. And at the time, I just mustered the courage. I was like, hey, I think I would like you to leave,
Mm,
you know?
mm.
And she got up and she left. And that was the first esteemable thing I ever did in sobriety. I was like, I knew what the right thing to do was. I knew I was very scared to do it because I don't like conflict and I didn't know anything. I didn't know how to operate in any kind of averse situation without a substance in my body. But I went through with it and she left and I felt better. And I was like, whoa, like I can do this, and those moments continued to happen for me in early recovery and like where I was able to exercise, like, what we talk about, principles, right? It's not that deep, simple, but not easy,
Yep. Yeah, I was just gonna say it's simple but not easy, but vital. It's vital. I mean, that's why people I don't want to try the 12-step thing. If you guys
No,
sound like a cult or whatever, like, look, whatever you're doing isn't working already. Just try. Like, I'm just
yeah,
asking you to try. If you go for give me 20 meetings. Give me 20 meetings. Come on. It's 20
yeah.
meetings and 20 occasions where you're doing something much better than what you've been doing.
I got my buddy Scott says, give us 90 days and we'll refund your misery. And
Right.
that's the truth, man. I mean, like if
Yeah.
you go to a place where you walk in that door and look, whatever is working for whoever is sober out there in recovery, like go for it. You know what I mean? Like keep doing what you're doing if you're staying sober. I'm not here, like you said, to be like to hit you over the head. This is how I did it. And dude, when I started to do it, I started to feel good. Like I was, I got done at that rehab and they were like, yo, dude, like you got nothing going. You got a toxic ex outside of this place. You got no job. I mean, zero going. And they were like, you need to go to somewhere else, like a halfway house. And I
Yeah.
remember I was like, I put up a fight for a little bit, and then I was like, all right, I'll go. And like I got to the halfway house, and they were like, well, you need to get a job. I'm like, I'm not getting a job. They're like, because guys are working at 7-Eleven and McDonald's, and I'm too good for that, right? I still am hanging on
Sure.
to the ego. There was a dude who worked at Hollister. It was like he was like had a job at MTV at the time. Like it was like, oh my God, Marwan works at Hollister. Like, and I got turned down from Hollister, Dick's, all this, people were just like, anyways, I tried to get a job at this place called Liberty Tax. There was a Statue of Liberty waving his hand
Oh
out
yeah, yeah, okay.
in the cold Maryland, like winter, dude. It was January. And I was like, I'm going to apply for this job. And I applied for the job. And the guy's like, no, you're not going to, we can't hire you. And I remember I was leaving and I'm looking at this poor bastard waving his hand outside. Right. And he goes, you can come back in a week. He goes, they usually quit, But I got a job at KFC. And that turned out to be like an amazing experience for me. Like I had worked in the NBA. I had done all this stuff like, all the bullshit. Like you're flying on private planes because you're working for the team. You know what I mean? Like it's not you. You're just very fortunate to be in this situation. Like I wasn't scoring the points, dude. You know what I mean? Like I wasn't that unique. But you're a part of it, so it goes to your ego. So stuff like that, you're thinking, well, I'm not going to get a job at KFC. But I like doing that kind of stuff. I mean, all that stuff I talked about that my ego told me was so important. Dude, I didn't know how to work the register at KFC. I was terrified. This woman who hired me, Sharika, I mean, I wouldn't let her without, like, I'd be like, oh my God, like somebody wants 2 chickens and a biscuit. And I'd be like grabbing her, like, come over here. And she'd be like, dude, like, God, if this guy's this bad on the register, we're not even going to be able to put him at drive-through because they want to put everybody in the winter at drive-through that's new because drive-through sucks. And I can remember, like, man, on a cold, like January night, like I mean, KFC's good, but I couldn't imagine why were all these people coming. The line was so long, and I was like, damn, this is like, dude, people are bitching at you. But I would say by the time I was done, I was like, I'd worked there for 4 or 5 months. By the time I was getting ready to leave the recovery house, I remember the story and I tell it, but this guy was being a total prick, like a guy, like a customer. And he's like, I got the headset on. And now at this point, I'm the man back there. The guy who runs the place is telling me I'm management material. And I'm like feeling really good about myself. And this guy's being an asshole. He's like, come on, like, where's everybody? Because like I was helping somebody out in the kitchen. So nobody's at the drive-through window. And I'm thinking like this prick. So I said to him, I'm like, I'm sorry, sir. Like, one of the chickens got loose in the back here. I'm attending to that. And the guy was like, you got a lot of chickens back there? And he was like totally spooked. And I was like, no, dude. I was like, just give me like a minute and I'll get with you. But like, to me, that's like the beauty of recovery, right, Jason? Like now I'm, like I said earlier, I'm living life like a loose shirt. Like, you know what I mean? Like it doesn't matter. I'm working at KFC and I'm almost as happy as I've ever been in my life.
Yeah.
And I go back, I was going to 2 meetings a day. I had a sponsor. I was working steps. I was just learning how great I was going to feel physically without sobriety. I was going for long runs, like working out's always kind of been like a thread for me. And man, it was amazing. I felt great.
Yeah. It's the beauty that comes in that humbling. I mean, I've talked to, the spectrum of people here on this podcast. I mean, Brandon Novak from Jackass, and all these people that just talking about like, yeah, I got like a normal job. And it was that needing to be humbled,
Yes.
like
yes. Needing to know that like, you're just relearning simple skills or learning. I mean, dude, if the line was long, I'd freak out and go to the bathroom. They'd be like, dude, where are you going?
Right.
We got like 30 people here, but it was like fight or flight.
Yeah.
I was like freaked out. I'm in my 30s. I don't know how to work the register. I'm like, oh, I'll go to the bathroom. They're like, get over here.
Pete, get your ass over here.
Yeah, all that stuff happened to me, and it's like looking back now, it's like almost like it doesn't seem real, but then again, it seems very real.
Yeah.
Because it made me who I am today.
Well, in those experiences, we get to employ so many of the principles that were not evident in our life. I mean, even just being respectful of people, or when you're dealing with the asshole, sometimes you got to create that boundary and also learn to keep your cool and your emotions in check and realize those will pass. There's so many beautiful things that come out of those things. I go to primarily Celebrate Recovery now, and it's these guys that part of this program, Getting Clean. Okay, you go here to this, our county does an amazing job. All right, you're going through your no, I'm in Central California.
Oh, you are? Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
So
like
just an awesome program. They'll go, they'll get them detox clean, then they'll start a residential. Then from there, they go to, the sober living halfway house, and then help them get their first job. And a lot of them, like,
Yeah.
they'll show up to Celebrate Recovery, like, hey, sorry if I stink. I've been picking up trash on the side of the road, but I got my first paycheck at like 27. Like, I've never actually earned a paycheck, and they're stinking to high heaven. They're out in this terrible heat. We got the fires that the fire departments are doing, so there's not bigger forest fires. It's hard to breathe out there, and these dudes have the biggest fucking smile on their face. Like, if that's not living,
no,
like, chill.
And I was, dude, goosebumps, and I was one of those guys. Like, I can remember going, like, being on fire in there, like talking with my KFC uniform on. Just like talking about how good life was. And that to me that's magic.
Yeah. Yeah. When's the spark then when it was, I mean, you're in Waco now, yeah?
I'm in Waco? Yeah.
Yeah. So you're doing news. You've done sports for ESPN, local high school. Like, when was the point that it was, I miss being in this avenue?
Well, when I was in treatment, I was like, I want to get into broadcasting. I want to put myself out there. That's what I wanted to do. And so I completely dedicated myself to, there was a minute where I thought I was going to be a stand-up comedian, which was an incredible exercise. I was sober. I was living in Jersey City, New Jersey. So I was going to, like, I was working in Manhattan, working in a kitchen, and I was going to, like, open mics doing stand-up. And, that was terrifying because I was newly sober. But it was like, honestly, I just tapped out. I couldn't handle the stress at that point. I was like, I can't do this. But it was amazing. I would get done doing like those 5 minutes, and I was loving it. I was walking on air. So I knew that muscle, I had to continue to flex that. It made me feel really good, the same way that, recovery was making me feel. And I just started to, all the bridges that I burned, naturally, right? Through sobriety, people would see me and I would reach out to them. And then I start to get hired again. And I'm working in the NBA again, working in the NBA Development League and the G League, doing play-by-play there. And then I get back with the Hornets. People would see me, right? And they'd be like, wow, you look great. And I'd already made an amends to them when the time was right. Again, this is like 2-3 years in. And then I ended up getting into TV news, which was not part of the game plan at all. But then I ended up in Waco, and people are like, hey, will you do like high school sports for us? We know you used to do sports. And I was like, yeah. And I did it. And I was like, oh my God, I love this. And then I started to reach out. I mean, and again, I'm skipping over. I was in a terribly toxic relationship. And I kind of put everything on pause. And so my growth professionally and personally was stunted. But I was a willing participant, and honestly, that was growth for me. I mean, I grew a shitload in those hard, difficult times. So when I got out of that relationship,
and didn't pick up, right?
I did not pick up. No,
I did. It's huge.
And it is huge. And I grew a lot, and and honestly, like, I didn't know what I didn't know. I honestly was in the middle of it, thinking that I was doing the right thing. But I wasn't. And, it could have been really bad. But it wasn't, because I got out of it. And when I got out of it, and I don't mean to like get all over this person. She's just a good person. It was not right. And so I got out of that relationship, and I was like, I really want to call games. Like, that's all I want to do. And I started to reach out to people. And it was crazy. In Central Texas here, a guy, a big baseball announcer, had a heart attack. He's fine now. Oh, but they were like, hey, we saw your stuff. We need you to call this Texas baseball series for ESPN, like linear television, like big games. Can you do it? And I was like, yeah. And I did it. And I was like, I was finally ready for the moment. There were things that had happened to me throughout my career in sobriety where I wasn't ready. Like, I got an opportunity to host this studio show for the NBA Development League. And and I sucked. I wasn't ready. I was like, and you're sober and you're like, whoa, that didn't go well at all.
All right.
I'm dyslexic. When I started doing the news, I could barely, I was not good. It was awful. But yeah, you too, right? But I got through. I got better. I mean, I did it every day for 2.5 hours. So of course I got better. So when I got the call from ESPN to call games, I was ready. God had me ready. I was ready. And I was also in the right place spiritually and personally. And then that baseball series went well. And then they were like, hey, we want you to do some college football for the Big 12. And then they were like, hey, do college basketball. And then they were like, we want to sign you to a contract. And now that's become the key cog in my career wheel, to the point where I'm at the end of this month. There's no way I can do both anymore. So I'm not going to do TV anymore. I'm just going to do sports play-by-play for ESPN. And then I'm doing a podcast now about sobriety at the place I'm sitting, Rogue Media. And I'm going to do a podcast every day about sports for Rogue Media. So it's kind of all moving in the right direction. And I'm so grateful for it,
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. That's these beautiful things and what resonated with me the most was the not yet being ready. And, I it's weird. I think almost like this started too early in my recovery. And if it had started a little bit later, there might have been a different perception. Like the things that we went and did early on, like none of it landed with me till somebody was like, dude, we'll use Charlie Sheen. Major League is one of my favorite movies, and
yes.
and when I was a pitcher, they called me Wild Thing, and it's like
I love it.
It's like, oh, well, I told my mom when I was a little kid that I would be on camera with Charlie Sheen. Granted, I meant acting, but then that happened, and it's like, well, there should have been, some greater service that came out of that.
So you were acting with Charlie Sheen?
No, we had him on this podcast when I had a co-host. Yeah. So back in the day, or the just so many different people, and now like I really like with you, I can tell this isn't going to be the last conversation we have, and so I think I really missed that what was being placed in front of me, and it's just
look. And it was part of look, at the time it was like terribly painful. I didn't know what direction I was going to go. I remember I got like auditions in TV news. I got an audition in Nashville and I bombed it. And and the same thing, I got an audition in Virginia. I bombed that, and I was like, wow. But I was like so hell-bent on continuing on the path, thinking like, okay, well, my trajectory now is I'm going to be a TV newsman. All the while, all I wanted to do was call games. And like legitimately, like God was taking me in this direction. Like, why would I go to Waco, Texas?
Right.
Why? Because a guy there is going to ask me to do play-by-play, and I'm going to be able to do it, and it's going to go well. And then another thing is going to happen. And now it's like, this is the last place on earth I would have picked to be a launching point for me. And, it's now I'm traveling all over the country calling games, and, and wherever I go, because I fell so hard and because I was such a disaster before I got sober, I tell everybody knows my story, dude. I mean, everybody, I don't hit people over the head with it, but if you're hanging with me and we're out to dinner, and it comes up, you're like, yeah, I don't drink. And if people want to know, I can tell them exactly what happened. Yeah. Like you said at another time. But it's pretty amazing. Like wherever I go, I have to be somebody in recovery, or else I'm nobody at all. Yeah. And if I start to hide that, it gets a little weird and chaotic for me.
Yeah, agreed. Have you had this experience when someone does ask you why you don't drink? So you tell them and they go, wow, holy that didn't seem to bother you telling me all these things. I'm like, because it doesn't.
No, it's a superpower. And it's the acceptance, like we were talking about at the beginning. Like I know this is who I am. It's not, I'm not defective. And I've really, it's been a gift for me, like to know how to live this way. There are times when I still, lose my shit, or I disagree with people. And, I am certainly not perfect, but I'm pretty good, dude. Ultimately, like I always kind of see my part in stuff,
Yeah.
always.
Yeah.
And it's because of this program, and because of being in recovery. Like how are things going when they're not going well, right? Like those are stuff, like the ability to maybe stay calm in a crazy situation is all, I learned it all in recovery, right? Going through real life hard stuff without any kind of, elixir, right? Like, but having to do it, life on life's terms. And so I have all these skills now that have been granted to me because of this way of life that I did not want desperately,
Yeah.
um, but was given to me because of how screwed up I was.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. And I have people, this is back to my point. I have people like, no, that wasn't your fault. Like, like, how can you take ownership of that? I'm like, because this is how it goes.
Yeah.
And this works for me. And we're not to be walked over, but we're also, I am to be serene if I'm to be of my ultimate service, right?
Yep.
So not getting caught up in resentments or stupid stuff like that enables me to sit here and talk with you and feel like I'm on another level when we're talking about recovery.
Yeah. Well, and I think without the ability to be at a greater level of consciousness and that taking responsibility, um, it's like, well, okay, if you want to say I'm a victim of that, but then I also have to place I'm a victim of my of the good things that have happened too. And I
Yeah,
don't believe that any of us are just some passenger in this thing. I think it's you make empowering decisions over disempowering. You have kind of an idea where you want to go with life and what you want to do. And as long as you're trying to do it to, especially if you just want to help other people
yeah.
or just leave something good and positive with them, shit starts to happen in a really great way. And it's beautiful. And like, I think it was Jacko Willnick, the former Navy SEAL, in his book, like the first line of his book, if I remember, is like, everything's your fault, accept it. And it's like you move to Kansas
Yeah.
where you're in Tornado Alley and then your house gets blown away and you're like, oh my God, we're a victim. No, you chose to move there. It's like moving to Waco and going, oh man, look at this dust storm. What the hell? It's
I'm
like,
telling you. And I really have learned that. Like I always, and it makes life so much easier where it's like, I'm just like, oh yeah, like that's my bad. And the hardest thing is like, my girlfriend who I love, like, she's going through it one day, right?
mm,
Just like I go through it some days. But like, so she'll talk to me and she's like so bright and so smart and so well adjusted, but she doesn't have the program that I have.
mm.
So I just got to lay in the cut and listen. I've learned like, I don't have all the answers. Like I like this works for me. Like, so nobody's looking for my unsolicited feedback on how they should be accountable, unless, unless it's like another alcoholic that's calling me or I'm sponsoring somebody, like I try to withhold, what I think to be are all the answers to the test, right?
Yeah.
Because some people just, they don't have the principles, and that's great. And that's great that we do.
Yeah. Well,
They don't
I
have,
think
they don't need them too, by the way. They're not-
yeah, yeah. Well, I think that a 12-step program should be implemented in every high school, but that's just me, like,
I think we
okay,
have something, yeah.
missing some life skills. Here you go. And I
Yeah.
think for me at the end, about people say, what have you got the most out of it? I said, it's raised my consciousness. Like, I also know that now if, I love ice cream and I could probably eat a whole carton, which I definitely did in my using times. It's like, this is a really good idea. Eat this whole carton. I know that I'll get sick. I know that, 3 scoops is probably where I got to stop. I understand how I am, especially like, oh, I'm going to eat all this sugar before bed. Then you wake up, you have anxiety. I wonder where that came from.
It's the same thing as like a terrible hangover. I've learned
Yeah.
that too, because I'll overeat a ton of sugar and you wake up in the morning and you feel like a broken record. It's like, oh, well,
Oh yeah.
body's
Oh.
telling me this isn't working.
Hey Pete, before we jump into some random questions, people want to get a hold of you, your Instagram the best way?
Yeah, Instagram's the best way. I'm easy to find. And then, the podcast that I've done here at Rogue Media, basically it's called The Payoff with Pete, Stories of Sobriety. And yeah, just like anybody that like, if you have any questions or you want to talk to me about sobriety or life or broadcasting or sports, like just hit me up. It's weird because I had this guy, this like young guy who's like getting into broadcasting. And I worked with a producer this year for ESPN, great dude named Alex. And Alex, I guess, met this guy. And Alex said, "Oh my gosh, he found out this young kid was sober, this young broadcaster." He's like, "You got to connect with Pete Sousa. He's sober too, and he's open about it." So this other AA guy calls me an AA guy. So we share the same career. Like he wants to kind of be where I am, and I've certainly been where he is. And he's sober for a couple of years. And so I'm like, dude, I like, oh my gosh, like I got an AA guy talking to me about broadcasting. Like he's like, I can't talk to this kid enough, right? Like I just love him to death. So like the reason I say that is, you and I share that common link, being sober. I don't know, dude, if somebody is, and I hate to say this, but it's true. Like if I get somebody that's sober and they want to talk to me, they kind of move to the front of the line because that's what I love. So yeah, just hit me up. Anybody that wants to talk.
And the links for their Pete's Instagram and the podcast are in the description, of course. So check it out. But I relate to that. Because it's like, if they're reaching out, this is a person I probably have the most to offer to. And
that's a great way to put it. I've never thought of it like that. Yeah.
It's like, all right, service work. Here we go. I love service work. But all right, random questions.
Jason, you're very good at this. You're very good at this.
Thanks. Yeah. I appreciate that very much, especially from fellow broadcasters. Yeah. I would be remiss if I didn't ask for a good story, at least during your time in the NBA. Next to motorsports, basketball is my favorite sport. So do you have a memorable, fun story from that time?
I'll tell you one, and I'll try to make it quick, but it totally relates to sobriety. So when I was working in the NBA, this is right before I got sober. I actually started to do radio for the Charlotte Hornets, the Bobcats, when Michael Jordan owned the team. Yeah. So I was doing a halftime show for the Bobcats. And it was the first time I did it all season long, was for the radio broadcast. And it was the first time they ever made the playoffs. So I'm in the tunnel, like there's studios close to the court, right? Where we would record the halftime show or we would do it live. And to get to his seat, Michael Jordan would kind of have to pass me because I stood in the corner. So one morning I have the bright idea, it's first playoff game, that what do I do when I wake up? I do drugs, right? Because that's what I did every day at this time. So I'm wired. I have obviously no alcohol. It's like 3 p.m. So during this game, Michael Jordan is trying to get to his seat and he pats me on the back. And I was just like a cat, the long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs, dude. I was freaked out, And I remember thinking like, the greatest player in the world ever just patted me on the back, like to be cool, like, hey, I know you work for me, get out of the way so I can get to my seat. And all I wanted was to get out of there and get a vodka tonic, dude. Now, here's where the story's awesome. I get sober. This is 5 years later. I'm back in Charlotte working for the Hornets. I'm walking down the tunnel to go to my radio broadcast position. And Jordan's walking by me with this guy, Buzz, who's the best. And Buzz worked in the Hornets front office. And Buzz is like, hey, what's up, Pete? Because Jordan doesn't know my name, but Buzz does. And Jordan goes, hey, what's up, Pete? And he hits me on the back and walks up. I was like, holy God gave me another chance. Yeah. Like, it was like, because I never thought I'd get like that chance back. Like I thought I'd put it all up my nose or whatever. And now here I was sober. And that was one of those things where, man, I'm doing the right stuff here. And that was in the NBA. So yeah. That's I'm happy you asked that question. Yeah. I don't think about it enough.
Thank you. That's a cool story. That's a beautiful story. All right. Hobby or interest that people might be surprised to learn that you have?
I watch reality TV. I just was watching and the reality TV I watch, usually I watch anything Dateline, right? As I get older, that's not a surprise. That's what old people watch, right? But Dateline, any real documentary. But I literally watched America's Sweethearts about the Dallas Cowboys cheerleaders. And I'm telling you, I was like, I'm only going to watch one episode. and there was like a cliffhanger at the end of the first, so I'm like, I gotta watch the beginning of the second. And I'm like, what is happening? So that's I will get lured into some BS television. But I mean, nothing too surprising. I love to run.
Yeah.
That's about it. Nothing I can think of right now.
Have you done any Drive to Survive, the Formula One
No, I
show?
heard it. I know it's awesome. I watched the golf one, right? Because I
Yeah,
don't
yeah.
have really any relationship with F1 besides like all the guys are rich, super successful, and look like they live amazing lives, and they have all these beautiful women all over them. So to me,
Sure.
I know whatever's going on out there is working. There's money all around it. And I heard that show was amazing.
Yeah, they do a really good job. Like it's funny because Lewis Hamilton's my guy, and
Okay.
so the head of the Mercedes AMG team. It's pretty funny because he sat down at the beginning of one season in the trailer, and they go, "Are you ready for another season of reality?" And he goes, "What you mean this bullshit?" And he goes, "This is more like any I forget what like show or fictitious thing he named because."
Yeah.
Like as a Formula One fan, I've watched it and other people text me, "What did you think of that episode?" And I go, "Yeah, that didn't happen in that race. That wasn't even at that track."
So what
Like
do you think? Is it a good show?
it's entertaining, like it's well done, and then
Okay.
but treat it as entertainment. Like this
Yeah.
isn't the reality of it all. Like, they've
Right.
done a good job of creating personalities, which sports
Yeah.
is so much missing. Like here it
Yes.
is.
Then
What's
that's
the
the
personality?
stories. That's what I love to do, tell people stories. My girlfriend works for this company called Solera, and
Mm,
they have a couple F1. I don't want to say drivers, but they're involved, like sponsorships and stuff like that. And I know that's like people in that company love going to those
oh yeah.
events.
I still
Yeah,
haven't been. I mean, but IndyCar, NASCAR. Grew up with family that went to pretty much every NASCAR event that was within a
Wisconsin.
500-600 miles, from
Yeah,
here. So
yeah.
and that had personality. That's like Kyle Larson is
Oh
a
man,
personal friend with my brother.
really?
And it's unfortunate because there's so much personnel. Like when we had Dale Earnhardt Sr. on the grid and all these different people, there's so much
Dude,
personality. It's
I lived in Charlotte like in 2004 through like let's say on and off till 2011. Like NASCAR was on top of the world. I
yeah,
mean, it was so popular, and sometimes I've heard people say like this is kind of inside basketball, but like NASCAR sort of like almost got too comfortable with how successful they were, and maybe lost their edge marketing and open things up for other sports or other racing outlets. I'm not an expert on that, but yeah, I'm very familiar with the NASCAR and the personalities and the beauty of those. I've been to a race like down there, like
yeah,
it was a crazy, one of
yeah.
those track in North Carolina in Charlotte. Yeah.
Oh yeah, they're as they would say, hauling the mail there. These were supposed to be random, quick questions, but oh well.
All right, all
Uh,
right. I'll stop with the long answers. I
that's
try.
all right.
Yeah.
If you could have dinner with any one person, who would it be, living or not?
Whew. God, that's a great question. I think this is my dad
Mm,
because he never saw me achieve any real like success on the other side of sobriety. And I would love to just visit with him and tell him, what I'm doing.
yeah,
Um, I think that would be like pretty awesome.
yeah, absolutely. Best and worst advice you ever received?
Best advice probably was don't take yourself too seriously. And the worst advice was like, hey, do you want this line? It's great.
It'll change your life, man.
Yeah, that was, yeah, I mean, something along those lines. Um,
Uh,
but anything to do with shortcut, because getting high, it's the same thing as taking a shortcut, right? What can I do to feel good now? How is it going to be easy? Um, and I thought that was going to work out, and like I said, it was just the biggest lie I ever told myself.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
and I think that's an important thing to share for, people trying to understand, how the makeup of our brain is going to change. And I just say we got to do things now where the payoff is on the back end and the suffering's on the front end. You run, that's not comfortable.
yeah,
I've really gotten into yin yoga. my mentor has been taking me through these damn stretches. This hurts, man.
Yeah.
Like we're in this pose. He's like, with your shoulder, this is gonna help. I felt great after being in this hold for 10 minutes and I'm shaking. So the payoff's on the back end now,
Yeah.
and it's just that flip-flop of it. And
Oh, that's how I got the name of my podcast, dude.
really,
Like this is what we're talking about here is the payoff of sobriety, right? Like it is hard. And a lot of times it includes fellowship, but also like some lonely work too, in recovery. And man, what a gift, right? Like don't quit before the miracle happens, because it will happen.
yeah, absolutely. I've not asked this one yet. What is one thing you think can't be explained?
Oh, the afterlife.
Mm,
I mean, I believe in God. I believe in, I do. I believe in God, right? But I don't know what goes. I'm not going to sit here and be like, I know what happens like after. It tells me. I'm always like, yeah, I don't know. I mean, just truly, I believe we go somewhere. I believe whether it's our legacy that continue, like this conversation I'm having with you, like I will carry this with me in one way or another for the rest of my life. More, more so because it's positive. So I believe like things like that, like live forever, but I'm just not sure. I'm just not sure. And I've never heard something where I've been like, yeah, okay, I got it. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
I know. I could get into so many philosophical debates with
I know
people
you
like,
could.
yeah,
Yeah.
like, do you
Yeah.
mean like my energy, my soul, my spirit, my
Yeah.
body, all the molecule, like, like, hey, in reality, we're actually made up of other people, and I just don't mean our lineage of family. If you think about it, people are like,
Yeah.
what the are you talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. At least I
Uh,
didn't say the Super Bowl 2 years ago where the Eagles lost to the Chiefs, because I still can't explain that. Yeah.
right.
Yeah. I'm a Philly guy. So I still
What
can't
the hell were you
explain that.
thinking?
Can't explain that away. Yeah.
It's funny you talking about that. I'm seeing now Rob McEllery's face from Always Sunny in Philadelphia.
Tell me about it.
What just happened?
That's my guy, Rob. Yeah.
Oh
Yeah.
gosh.
Ask me one more. Ask me one more.
All right.
These are awesome questions.
What's one thing you would tell your childhood self?
Oh man, like you got to be patient.
Hmm.
Like, like just relax and be patient. Like, I was a person. Even when I first got sober, I was like 6 months sober. I thought I was going to be some sort of superstar. Like, I thought everything was like a microwave situation. Everything was overnight success, and it's just not. It's just not how it goes. So just be patient, man. And it's good that you're asking me that, because I can tell the little kid inside me today to be patient, because I'm going to need it at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, that's for sure. I definitely still have a lot of those conversations with that little kid, and it's good to connect with them too.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it really is. And to understand that that's still there inside me.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Well, I think that's the beauty of what you get to do is it's loving these sports from when you're young, and for me, sometimes it's just building a set of Legos or whatever else it is, and it's like, wow, like I'm in a really cool space at that particular moment in time.
And that's it, being there.
Yeah. Hey, Pete, this is where I like to give you the Jerry Springer moment. You got the floor. Anything that you want to lend, just words of positivity, maybe someone who's struggling, maybe has a loved one who's struggling.
Yeah. There's always hope. There's always hope. I mean, I can't say that enough. Like I was as hopeless as people say someone could get. And here I am. There is always hope. And if have a family member, there are places that can help you deal with that. I'm not here to tell you how you should go about, right? But there's always hope. And if you're an addict, definitely know that there is always hope. And that you never have to feel the way you do when you wake up hungover, or the way you do when you're jammed up after doing drugs all night, ever again.
Yes, sir. Pete Sousa, thank you, good sir.
Yeah, man. Thank you. Jason, when are
Yeah.
you going to come on my podcast?
Whenever you just tell me and we'll get it recorded. I'm
All right,
down.
we'll schedule like next Monday or Wednesday.
Perfect. Monday will be great.
All right, I'll shoot you some times. We'll make it happen.
All right. Well, let me do my closer here.
Look at this. I jumped right in. There you go.
You
Yeah.
jump right in there. All
Yeah.
right. Remember, no outside solutions to inside problems, and keep knocking doors down.